before we can use the input mapping context and add movement to the character, we have to add this to our player blueprint class. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to the player and let's go inside of the player base. And inside of here, we are going to add the movement. So when we add the movement here, it's going to apply it to the children as well. So in the parent blueprint class, the player base, let's go to the event graph. And inside of the event graph, you can right click, hold the right mouse button, and you can pan around inside of here. Now let's go ahead and select all of those and hit delete on the keyboard and start from the beginning. As the first thing, I'm going to right click. And when you right click, you can select between the different functions and events. The first event we're going to create is called the begin play. Begin play, go ahead and select the event begin play. And what that does is what should happen if I begin playing the game. So you can write code here. So if I drag from this execution pin and I let go and I write print and use this print string. So this is the simplest function that we have in Unreal Engine in Blueprints. This will just print some text on the screen. Now, if I compile and I click on play, you can see it says hello up here. So if I click on play again, you can see it says hello. So this just says what should happen if I begin playing the game. And what we want to do is we want to add the mapping context. So the way you do this is first you have to get the player controller reference. So to do that, let's right click and just search for controller. And you can select this one called get controller. So we are getting the controller. However, this one is just the basic default player controller in Unreal Engine. So we have to specify to Unreal Engine that we're actually talking about this custom player controller that we made. So the way we do this is we can drag from here and we can say cast to. And what cast to means is we're trying to get the reference of this player controller. So I can drag from here and say cast to, and then you have to give it the name of the player controller. So PC player controller or PC Counter-Strike is what we called it. So go ahead and select it. And now we can access everything inside of here. So let's say in the player controller, if I, for example, added a variable, just call it the hello or something like that, anything random, click on compile. And inside of the player base, now you can see if I drag from here and write hello, I can see the variable I just made. So casting is you can access everything inside of this player controller now because you have a reference to it. And this is what's called blueprint communication, because now you are in the player base and you are communicating with the player controller and you can access everything inside of here. So the only thing we want to do inside of here is we want to drag and then write enhanced. I never remember this name, it's so long. Enhanced input local player subsystem. So just write enhanced and select it here. And from this one, we're going to drag and say add mapping context. So go ahead and add the mapping context and remember to connect your code, else it will not work because it's going to go from the event. It's going to get this player controller reference, and then it's going to add this mapping context to this blueprint. And remember, in the mapping context, you have to click here and select the mapping context you made. So go ahead and click on compile, and that is actually it. Now you have added the mapping context to the player, and you can now use events and create the movement. However, in the next lesson, we are going to talk about blueprint interfaces. I don't really like doing casting because casting creates hard references. And in Unreal Engine, when you start the game, when you, for example, let's say you created a full game, you have casted to, for example, 100 blueprints in your game, and now it is released on Steam. However, for the hard references, when a player opens up your game, before it loads up the main menu and everything else, it's going to load the hard references first. And if you have, let's say, 100, 200 in your game of these casting, it's going to slow down your game because it needs to load all of the hard references. It needs to load all of these first before it can run your game. I'm not saying you should never use this because there are cases where it's ridiculous to not use it. However, for this case, what I usually like to do is I like to make a blueprint interface, and from that we can communicate with other blueprints without creating hard references. So let's do that. Let's make our game more optimized, and I'm also trying to show you how I would do it normally, the advanced way. and I don't really like to teach you bad ways to do it. So let's try to avoid casting for now, and let's move on to the next lesson where we can replace this part.